Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is John Garside at Secure John.
And I'm Christian Gilby, Product Marketing.
We taking the opportunity to record this session. This is the content that we were delivering for the Atmosphere local event the past, 8 weeks?
Yep. It's been a long 8
17
weeks.
cities plus any number of meetups that we've done along the way. It's been fantastic meeting so many of you, our customers, and also our partners. And while we've been doing this, the content's changed, so we thought this would be a good time to record this, create a record, and also opportunity for you to see again, and if you didn't make it, to see what you missed. To that end, I mean, the last couple of weeks has been amazing for us as Arubans.
It has. I mean, it's great to see the excitement from customers, what's going on in the market as well, analysts, feedback.
I'm glad you said analyst. I wanted to show you something actually. Could you flash up the?
Yeah.
So I wanted to show you this without doubt is a crowning glory for us this year. I think everyone's amazed what we've done with orange rectangles and orange dots. There really is. I met so many great partners doing the partner sessions as I did. Do you know the technical reason why Cisco access points, why the LED is blue?
You know, I've often wondered that. I saw one the other day in a hospital, had poor connectivity, and I was wondering, what's the blue LED for?
I'll be honest with you, Christian, it's because they're sad. And not only that, but apparently they're just getting bluer. We now have the Magic Quadrant report, which shows Aruba as a definitive leader now in this space. And really interesting, we'll talk about it more, but not just the wired and wireless, but security was such a big part of it as well. But then if that wasn't worse, and just to increase I mean, they must be despondent at this point, is the critical capabilities report. A clean sweep, all 6 categories.
Yeah, no vendor has done this before.
Never happened before. Absolutely phenomenal. So if you see an LED and it's blue, now you know why. It really has been, I mean, we're grateful every day for working here. It's a fantastic team. We have great leadership. This isn't something that just happened. This is something that happened before the acquisition. Hewlett-Packard didn't just look at our numbers. They looked at the roadmap. They looked at what they could do to improve upon it, to speed up and to make delivery literally more. We have to thank the larger group for their assistance in this.
Yeah, and I think the strength of our partners has been a key part of our success, right?
Absolutely, it's just been, it's been phenomenal. We couldn't have done this without you, our customers and our partners, and so that we say thank you very much. That said, I suppose we should really go through to the actual agenda. So we're splitting this into 2 videos. The first one, we're going to talk about the technology changes over the past year, about the things that we've accomplished, the things that have changed. And then in the second part, we're going to go through the selling motions, how to bring all these different elements together, the narrative to apply that, where we found success, where we hope you'll find success. So before we get into the Aruba bit, I suppose we should start off with the Office Connect.
Yeah, let's run through Office Connect. The Office Connect solution, we have a renewed focus on this. We just launched the OC20 AP this summer. We also introduced a mobile app. So especially in the small business, if you're selling into it, sub 100 employees, it's all about ease of use, and have a solution that just works. So we've basically taken our expertise on the hardware software layer with Aruba and now extended that to the Office Connect portfolio. So you can very rapidly deploy a network in a small business, whether it's your engineers deploying and managing, because using this mobile app, you can even remotely connect to your customers' offices. But it's really about simplifying that solution. This is, as I mentioned, this is not part of the Partner Ready for Networking program, but you can still sell it as part of the HP networking program. So it's very low touch from the Aruba side, so typically our sales teams do not get involved. It's really a portfolio. The focus is on simpling. Quoting, for example, it's flat discounts depending on your level. So really it's to enable you to rapidly deploy this and address that smaller business. So with that, let's jump into the meat of it, which is really what we call our mobile-first architecture. And I'm going to give a solution update here. John and I are going to tag team a little bit across the portfolio. We'll talk through infrastructure as well as mobile first platform, which is really our solution layer. So on the infrastructure side, which is really built around this Aruba secure core, really extends from the edge of the network. We've got our wireless LAN solutions and Bluetooth or BLE. And then for branch networks, we have our remote access solutions, things like our VIA client. So it's a software VPN on the laptop, the smartphone, that allows teleworkers to connect. Or our RAP APs or remote APs that automatically boot up and connect to the network. Then on the access switching side, we have our Aruba switches, which if you aren't familiar with it, this has the HP Provision heritage. So we basically took our IP, intellectual property in Provision. We've taken some of the mobility features that we had in the Aruba switches, and we've rebranded that. So it's really going forward the Aruba switches with this focus on extending mobile first. As well, back in June, we introduced the 8400, which I'll go in a little bit more detail, but this is really our entry into the core of the network. So we became the experts really at the edge, an access layer driven by mobile IoT, and now we're extending this out into the core of the network. And then finally, SD-WAN or branch solutions is another area of investment for us. We have some SD-WAN features today in our 7000 series branch controllers. It will be an area we're continuing to invest in as we go forward into this coming year. So in June, we also introduced the Aruba 8400, which is really about extending this mobile-first architecture to the aggregation and core layer. Now, why does it matter? Because if you look at what's going on in the enterprise space, your customers have flat to marginal increase in their IT budgets. I've seen numbers 1% to 2% growth. But the numbers of devices coming into the enterprise are growing at astronomical levels. You've got mobile devices, IoT, 20 billion devices by 2020. And you just can't do what you've always been doing, which is managing your network through CLI, like customers are doing with the competition's core switches. So you need something to change. And that's where we brought in this game changer with Aruba 8400. So this is a modular switch, scales up to 19.2 terabits per second. So really in the data center class of performance. And that's so that you'll be able to handle the speeds coming in with all these mobile devices, but also the shift to cloud networking, where we see the traffic patterns change, a lot more north-south traffic, but also cloud apps require on-demand access to data. So employees no longer are storing all the files locally on their machine. They're downloading or uploading to tools such as Dropbox or Salesforce. So it needs a lot higher speeds as the network grows into the future. We also introduced the 8320 in September, and that is really a fixed form factor version of the core switch. So this enables us to really accelerate and own the building as you go into your customer markets. But I think what the most exciting thing is about this platform that we've introduced is really in the OS. So Aruba OS CX is really a next-gen OS, and it's built from the ground up, focused on automation. So we have 100% REST-based API coverage. Everything you want to configure on that switch, you can automate through REST. Also pulling statistics through. And that's where we tie into one of the key components is our network analytics engine.
Yeah, and analytics is huge. Analytics actually tells you how your business is performing, not just your network. You can draw a straight line between the health of a business and the optimization of its network. As Christian alluded, the number of devices is increasing. But if you go into your customer's data center, if you go into the server room and you look at those 65, those 76 legacy, truly legacy, I remember deploying them myself in 2001. That's a while ago now. But you look at the number of green lights that are flicking, not many. All those high density port modules, they're not being used. You're still paying for coverage, you're still paying for support on them, but they're not being utilized. You need the brains, but you don't need the footprint. And this is where we're seeing it. The analytics side of it, showing how the network's being used, showing what traffic is doing, what's north-south, what's east-west, what's real-time, what's telemetry, what's video, what's voice. And then you take that as an active feed, and that becomes a sensor to the business. not just for security, but for everything. Anything that's happening in your business is happening on your network. This is where machine learning and artificial intelligence starts. This is the root.
So now let's take a step back and look at how we actually deliver value for your customers with the switching portfolio, all the way from our edge switches, the 2530, which is really a basic layer 2 switch, all the way up to in the core with the 8400. The focus is really about extending this mobile-first architecture. And what does that mean? That means doing integration where we've got role-based access that's unified across the wired and wireless network because devices are mobile. Secure tunnel node, which allows us to actually tunnel traffic from a port or even a user on a port from one of these switches back to a mobility controller. Now you might ask, why does that matter? Let me share an example. We had a customer, EBC, a couple months ago where it's a university and they've deployed the switches and wireless, and what they've done on the wireless network is they've enabled policies for the students. So in the dorm, they can do peer-to-peer traffic, but they're policed, so they can only do, let's say, 20 megabits a second over the wireless network. What they found happening is students are taking their laptops, going into the library, and plugging it into the back of a desk phone, because there's an Ethernet jack there. And they're getting untethered or unpoliced access to the network and downloading movies. So what the university's looking at doing with our Aruba switches is the switches have the capability now with this integration where a switch sees a device it doesn't recognize, it can query off to ClearPass, and then ClearPass can say, oh, you need to tunnel this to a mobility controller. So then that switch will tunnel that traffic, and in this example, the phone traffic stays local on that VLAN for voice, but it'll actually tunnel that laptop traffic back to a mobility controller, goes through our app RF firewall, and can actually police and apply the exact same policies they have. So we're really finding that mobility, which was a lot of these features developed for the wireless, is now actually pushing back into the wired network as we see people or devices start to become mobile on wireless and dynamic as well. I think deployment's another big one where we're focusing here is simplifying deployment, which is going to play into especially your distributed customers. Retail is an example, or healthcare where you've got medical offices. So we're taking some of the things like zero-touch provisioning. You can now deploy a switch, plug it in, it'll connect through the cloud through our Activate service, and it can download the configuration from Central, or if they're using on-prem management from Airwave, to really speed up deployments.
I think a great example of that, we had a deal this year for the 2930, which was 8,000 devices up front with an option on 4,000 for a fast food chain. Yep. The testing for such a big deployment was completed in 9 weeks, purely because I had the pleasure of working with both their operations team and their security team, purely because they didn't have to go to site. At no point. They were literally mailing them out to the franchisees owners, and the guy from the fry station could do the deployment. They had the environmental side things covering because, you know, who would have known that breaded chicken could produce a network issue, but they were able to actually do this deployment that quick, the testing and then the deployment, purely because of the integration with Central.
Right.
It replaced so much of the functionality that they wanted from IMC, but it delivered right now.
Right. So let's jump ahead onto the wireless side. So we have the richest portfolio here to address both 11AC, Wave 1, and Wave 2. So all the way from our 207, budget AP really targeted at mid-size or smaller business, up to the latest 340 series, which we actually introduced beginning in November. That will be shipping in a few months. The 340 series is dual uplink, so supports one BZ support. So 802.3BZ, if you aren't familiar, is multi-gig. So supporting 2.5 gig in this case. On the 330 series, it supports 2.5 or 5 as well. So it really allows us to scale and get ready for the future. So that really matches with the switching portfolio. So on the switching side, from the 2930M and up, we have added Smart Rate or BZ support. So really, if customers are looking at deploying switching solutions today for the future, you need to be talking to them about our HP Smart Rate or BZ multi-gig. As you're seeing, some of the higher end APs in our AC portfolio today support it. Coming in the years down the road, when AX comes to play and starts to accelerate, you'll see more and more use of BZ. Then we have our hospitality APs, really designed for wall mount APs. For example, in a hotel, we see them in dorms a lot, in universities. Remote access points, so these are for teleworkers. We sell a lot of these into the insurance industry, where the agents who are working from home, they basically take one of these wraps or remote APs, plug it in the home office. That AP will then connect in through a VPN back to headquarters and secure the traffic and deliver the same security at that home office as you have in headquarters. On the outdoor side, a big focus for our outdoor APs is really about bringing simplicity to outdoors. So when we introduced the 270 a couple of years ago and now extending into the 360, 370, we went from the past and what we see with competitors, where you can have as many as 11 part numbers to deploy an outdoor AP, to now it's effectively 2. You pick an AP model, you pick one of a couple bracket options, slide it in, connect PoE, and you're done. So it's really bringing the simplicity of, or complexity of deploying a video camera to deploying outdoor wireless. So you should be attaching outdoor in deals you're working. It also drives up your revenue, because the cost point on those outdoor APs, because they're ruggedized, is higher. And then on the bottom right, we have our rugged APs. These are really designed at environments like stadiums, warehouses, refrigeration, where you don't need it sealed from water, but it's got to have a high temperature swing. So we have our 228 and then just introduced a Wave 2 version in the 318. I think the one other thing I do want to point out with the latest APs, the 318 and 370, we took feedback from you guys and from customers. So we have added an SFP module into that for the secondary Ethernet port. So now you can actually run fiber for those longer reaches for the outdoor rugged APs. I do want to reiterate here as well, we, in the past 6 months, have introduced a few APs here on the hospitality side, which I think not a lot of people are aware of. So our first Wave 2 hospitality AP, so great for a hotel environment where you've got high density. You want to deliver the best service for guests in the hotel, or in a university is another great example where those students are getting on their Xboxes and PlayStations, doing research and need high bandwidth access.
I wanted to add to that because, as we've been doing this tour, we've been doing these in hotels all the time, and I wanted to draw attention to a utility which I hope our partners are using, the Aruba utilities. You can use this on Android. Every hotel we walked into, I run this, and I can instantly see what the network's made up. We're here in the customer experience center right now. I'm glad to say it's 100% Aruba, which is a good thing. But we saw a lot of ruckus out there. Are they still called ruckus this week? No. What are they called this week? Xeris? No.
Yeah, they're going through a bit of churn, acquisitions, spin-offs, a lot of confusion in the market.
But there's a lot of those older devices out there right now, and these are the perfect replacement, the absolute perfect replacement for them to deliver the functionality that people want now. Especially in hospitality, the 3 core requirements now for any hotel I look at: hot water, firm bed, good Wi-Fi.
Exactly.
These are the 3 tenements of hospitality. These are a fantastic replacement for what is legacy, for what is becoming increasingly unsupported, and also no hospitality person wants a bad review on TripAdvisor because the Wi-Fi sucks.
Exactly.
It's just consistency. So use these things together. See the environment you're walking into, knowing that you have a full toolkit at your disposal.
Yeah, I think that's tying into Ruckus as well, the 360 series here. That was a focus with introducing this product. So it was really to bring a lower cost point into outdoor so you can better compete with Ruckus, because they were deploying a lot of these, especially in the service provider space, but also hotels for outdoor areas like pools. So great solutions here in terms of great performance and hitting the cost points you need to hit to go in and migrate those customers from their older and questionable Ruckus solution.
The 203R has also been, the wraps also been a fantastic launch. We've seen a financial institution order 25,000 of these, again on a very short testing procedure, because they could take the corporate network and extend it. And little Jimmy, the CEO's son, could just plug this into the router, but crucially, if he plugs his Xbox into this, he's not getting on the corporate network. The controls that they have from ClearPass are just natively extended. We've also seen this fantastic example in healthcare in the South, where they shut down their call centers for their advice lines. And they've actually made their entire call center program, some 2,500 people, remote, just through these devices. And this has given them an additional benefit. Culturally, it's very hard to get disabled people into call center environments. They weren't equipped, it wasn't the best place. They are set up to work from home. This has reduced turnover. It's given them a better workforce. They had fantastic people who were qualified and wanted to be nurses and to give care, but weren't able because of physical limitations. Being able to work from home, crucially being able to work from home securely to HIPAA standards has been phenomenal. Plus, they shut down a call center. 2,500, the space savings on this was phenomenal. Everybody wins. Great culture, great organization to work with. Great regular partner. Wasn't one of the big national accounts that did this. This was a regular local partner that delivered this solution.
So excellent. Definitely focus on these as you're selling. I do want to cover a little bit on the new 340 series. As I mentioned, this was introduced beginning in November, hit the price list. It is not shipping yet. It requires Aruba OS 8.3. Going forward, all of our new APs are going to be based on Aruba OS 8. So you should be having these discussions with customers if they're starting to look at some of the new APs to start to get plans in place to make that move to Aruba OS 8. How do you position the 340? So the 340, you really should be positioning this as same performance as a 330, but hitting the price point of a 320. So better performance, better cost. We are not end of sailing the 320 and 330 at this point, but ultimately that is the direction to go. So you can give a better solution to your customers. I will note here one thing you see on the external antenna version. It does have a snap off because there's 8 antenna connectors. Why do we need 8 antenna connectors? Let's jump ahead. The other thing this AP introduces is dual 5 gigahertz. But we've said don't do dual 5 gigahertz. Because if you look at some of the competitors out there, Cisco, a few others, do have APs that support dual 5 gig, but they haven't done it right. They basically just turned on the software, allowed you to set both radios in 5 gig, did not design it from the ground up. So this AP, we've actually designed from the ground up to run dual 5 gigahertz. So it doubles the performance and client capacity. We built in isolation. We're the only solution that has that. So we've actually got active filtering so that radio A will use the upper band of 5 gigahertz, radio B uses the lower band. Why do we have to do that? It's because you don't want those transmitters to interfere because they're running in the same frequency. And then on an operations side, there's a manual mode selection where I can force that AP into dual 5 gigahertz. But I think what's more interesting is we've actually built in an automatic mode where based on the clients it's seeing in an environment, so if there's all 5 gigahertz clients or a high density of those, we can automatically switch the mode of the APs to run in dual 5 gig or dual band mode, which is the typical mode of 2, 4, and 5 gigahertz. So I think it's really about simplifying deployments and doing it right with having this filtering. So that allows you to compete. Also, we've had some feedback from partners that some of the RFPs that the competitors are placing in have put in requirement for dual 5 gigahertz. So this allows you to address that now and deliver the right solution. So now on the controller side, we've got 2 sets of controllers. We have our 7000 series really focused on branch deployments, and then we have our 7280, which is really for mid and large size campus. Recently introduced the 7280 as really our flagship controller. The other thing that I wanted to point out that we've also enabled virtualization. So the first controller here was the VMC Tact, but now we've extended this out to the mobility controllers as well as the mobility master, where customers can choose their deployment mode, whether they want to go with an appliance or a VM. And it really matches what their business model and comfortableness is with platform. Cost-wise, it's very close in terms of revenue to you, to us, when you sell that. I think the main difference I would say between the two is on firewall and encryption performance. If there's high needs there, you're always going to get the better performance with the appliance, so position those products rather than the virtualized. We are seeing still the bulk of deployments of mobility controllers are appliance, and I expect that to continue, but now your customers have that flexibility. For example, spinning up a branch office rapidly, now I can do that with a VM. On the 7280, which as I said, we introduced over the summer, I think the exciting thing here is it delivers competitive scale relative to the 8540 at 1/4 of the price. What drove us to develop the 7280? It was things like tunnel node, where customers are wanting to tie in the switches to controllers more. We needed to boost up their performance. So this goes up to 80 gigabit of encryption performance, 100 gig of firewall. I think the other thing that's interesting is it's the first controller to introduce hardware redundancy on the interfaces. So now those uplinks will fail over at a hardware layer rather than just software. Delivers faster failover, which is more critical in these larger deployments. So let's talk about Aruba OS 8. So this is where things are going, where our investment is. What did we introduce recently on the Aruba 08 platform? 8.1 introduced this live upgrade. Why should I care? So if your customer is, for example, in a healthcare environment, it's a 24/7 operation. You don't have maintenance windows. Live upgrade, which is unique to Aruba, no other vendor has it, allows us to leverage our ARM technology so that we effectively build a map of overlapping APs. So I can upgrade one access point while the neighbor serves those clients. And after that AP is upgraded, I'll then go and upgrade one of its peer APs. So it effectively does a rolling upgrade through your network, slashing the outage time to the network. So really big. We see it resonating, as I said, in healthcare, especially public venues is another one, like a hotel where people may be working and want that coverage around the clock. So it's a great solution for that. I think multi-zone's another great example here of innovation, where we've effectively allowed you now to deploy one set of APs across a venue, but actually connect that and manage it through multiple controllers. The first customers that drove us here were in the government space, where a customer wanted a green network and a red network, and the admin teams were not allowed to touch the config of either domain. LPVs is another great use case for this. Like San Francisco Airport's a good example, where our customers deployed multiple controllers so that you can have a separate guest network and operations network, but leverage the same APs. Because the problem with wireless is it's a shared medium. So if I deploy two sets of APs, those APs are going to collide. So multi-zone allows us to serve a venue with one set of APs or RF coverage, but then deploy services over top of it with the controllers. I think the other thing, as I said, is the Mobility Master and controller are now virtualized in Aruba OS 8. So that gives customers that flexibility of deployment. We're going to be continuing to focus here on things that improve scalability as well as configuration. So things like centralized licensing, hierarchical configuration. So it's really about simplifying and making the network more robust. The last one I want to cover as well is we have a promotion going on right now, Mobility Master Promo. Information's available on the partner portal. Definitely check it out. This is really to lower the bar as your customers move to 8 and they look at adding a Mobility Master into the network. It's to lower the bar for them to deploy that and easier sales and help you transition those customers to 8. Why do we want to get customers to Aruba OS 8? First, it's really about focusing on minimized downtime, so things like live upgrade and clustering, the scalability, simplifying deployments with things like zero-touch provisioning, the hierarchical config. But I think the most important one here is the last bullet, which is really this is where engineering's investing the resources. We're adding new access points like the 3 I talked about earlier, the 317, 318, 340. Those are being delivered on Aruba OS 8 only. So if your customer is looking at new APs, they need to get on to 8. Also new features, new protocols. When 11AX comes out in the next year or two, that will also be developed on top of Aruba OS 8. So if your customers aren't looking at it today and they're fairly big organizations I would definitely recommend you start working with those customers to, let's say, start deploying 8 in their labs, getting comfortable with it. Maybe as they deploy a new building, have them deploy that building on Aruba OS 8, build some comfort with it. We have a lot of case studies and a growing number, definitely private references as well. So reach out to your Aruba channel teams to get references if you need that, so customers feel more comfortable moving to Aruba OS 8.
Thank you, Christian. So a mobile platform's nothing without software. And for a hardware business, we actually employ far more software engineers than we do hardware. Comes in four flavors. So network management, Airwave and Central. Security, ClearPass, secure NAC solution, network access control. And Introspect, user entity behavior analytics. Net Insight, formerly the Rasa acquisition. And Meridian, the location services platform. Airwave's the reason I'm in front of you today. Before I worked here, before my life of executive cupcakes here in the Customer Experience Center, I used to have a real job, and I was actually an Airwave user, and it was that really brought me into the Aruba culture. I'm always grateful to it. I will say right now, I wish I'd had some of these functions myself. So some of the functionality of IMC is coming down, things like the topology view, but also now the live upgrade history. Ability to see all of that in one place, a fantastic and a much desired feature from both our customers and you, our partners. Obviously, with the new operating system with CX in the switches, that's brought new capabilities as well, and they're now fully deployed with view to spanning tree configurations and the like. And obviously, as we bring out new functions in the 84, 8320 and its family, that function and the management functionality will be here in Airwave. One final point worth noting, we've extended support for IPv6, so you'll be able to tick that box on those federal opportunities. With Central, that goes from strength to strength, and you see the uptick and the desire from it from our customers. One of our biggest deployments over recent months was done by the good people at Red Lobster. They've not actually become network engineers. I believe they're still very much into seafood. But they were able to use Central to speed up and to do their own deployment. That is the real strength of this. We've brought some features into this that were really wanted, such as the visual RF. These devices are actually the best sensors for radio notification, for seeing how the airwaves are being used. So to pull that function down, to put it into the cloud, it just has made great sense. Crucially, whilst we're doing all this, all these elements, bringing these networks up quickly, speeding up management, all of this is a huge part of the MSP program. We'll be talking about that more later on. And that brings us to security. Now, I don't believe that anybody thinks the world is becoming a more secure place. Any attack that happens to any of your customers will at some point come onto the network. So it becomes a great place to detect attacks. When we look this year, we published a report in the early part of the year, we surveyed 3,000 customers. 56% of them recorded a breach, notified of a breach in their environment related to IoT. Now, a good chunk of those were from the Myra attack, where over 70 million IoT cameras were exposed. A vulnerability was hijacked, the devices were pawned, and they were weaponized. They were targeted against the dying DNS infrastructure. They took down Twitter, they took down PayPal. They even took down significant parts of Amazon's AWS infrastructure, something we all rely upon on a daily basis, whether it's buying groceries or watching Netflix. But all of these things were connecting to the network. The way in which we work now, the spirit of collaboration, of working together, it creates risk that has to be managed. That is why we announced a couple of weeks ago the Aruba 360 Secure Fabric. Now essentially it's an architecture that relies upon two products, but crucially it relies upon Aruba's culture. That cultural point starts with the Aruba Secure Core. Every access point, we're here in Kirti's garage in the CEC, we actually have the original Aruba 52 on the wall here. But since near day one, we've always had something called a TPM chip to make sure that that is the access point that you think it is, so that somebody can't put an errant one into your environment. We've also had firewalls to prevent DAuth. We've always had IPS built into the access points. We've always had VPN architectures, the secure routing functions, creating GRE functions. That culture is what allowed us to become so successful, to become the first vendor on the NSA procurement list. And it's now that same culture and those same technologies that make up the Aruba Secure Core. If you're an Aruba customer, if you're using our firewall, if you're using rather our switches, our controllers, our access points, you already have a natively more secure environment. But our culture has always been one of openness, of working with all vendors, and it continues to be so. Everything I'm about to talk about now, whether it's the NAC side or the UEBA side, works on anybody else's infrastructure, whether it's Extreme, whether it's Cisco. So ClearPass, our secure NAC solution, that gives you control, gives you visibility of what connects, what is connecting, and control of that to your enterprise network, regardless whether it's wired, wireless, multi-vendor. Introspect UEBA then lets you know what they're doing, what every device, what every user is doing, and gives you a risk. Crucially, we work with best-of-breed solutions, whether it's Palo Alto, McAfee, Carbon Black. We work with them because they are the best point solutions for security, but we use them as additional sensors, as additional event points that we can respond against. Because if you talk to a customer and say, is your network secure? They'll point to the firewall and say, yeah, I've got this really strong firewall. But what happens if somebody walks into your building and plugs into that IP phone, as Christian talked about before? What happens then? The difference between perimeter and internal security couldn't be bigger, couldn't be broader, and couldn't be riskier. So ClearPass, our secure NAC solution. We've changed a few functions and we'll talk about those. But what I want to just highlight right now is a change in selling motion. What we sell now is visibility. Know what is connected, what is connecting to your network now. Now. And now. Understanding that if you don't know, if your customer doesn't know, they don't know their risk. Once you know what's connected, what's connecting to your multi-vendor environment, to your wired and wireless multi-vendor environment, you want control. And that should be an automated process. That should not consume more people resources. We want to get to a panacea where all devices, all users are either automatically authenticated or authorized. There should be no unknowns in your enterprise environment. You should lower your risk that simply. Finally, adaptive response, where these best-of-breed perimeter security solutions, Palo Alto, Checkpoint, your SIM, spot risk, spot an event, the internal security, your NAC can respond to it, quarantine, boot, or choke the offending device on the inside of the network to minimize your risk instantly. That all sounds fairly comprehensive. But earlier this year, we acquired a company called Nyara. Their product has become Introspect, also Introspect UEBA, User Entity Behavior Analytics. If ClearPass is what's on your network, Introspect is who's in your network, what are they doing, and is it a risk? Over 100 models, both supervised and unsupervised, of machine learning and artificial intelligence, giving you a risk, telling you what should be a priority right now. Your sim is like a 3-year-old child. It sees everything as a monster under the bed. Ah, it's dangerous. But we look at the shape of everything. We compare user to user in the same groups, the same divisions, to look at the shape of what they do. This is an early warning detector for hacking. This is the canary for the modern day coal miner, the NOC and SOC supervisor. We look at the risks, we look at the events, we allow you to do everything within one interface to create a forensic document of what has taken place, to know what's actually doing, so you can then take action more quicker, losing less data, if any at all. For Aruba customers, for those customers that have our controllers, our access points, and our switches, we've even created a ready-to-go solution called Introspect Standard, which is very easy to stand up in a POC, very easy to deploy. Dan still works with those best-of-breed third parties like Palo Alto and Checkpoint to give them total visibility at the security layer of their business. This has to be my favorite slide of the entire presentation because it shows you all the elements that actually go into it. So identity. Whose laptop is this? Who is in control of that IP camera? That is entity. Device plus user. We use identity sources, all the standard ones you would expect, like Microsoft Active Directory, from Aruba, from ClearPass, from Infoblox, and even from Cisco. The infrastructure, the network tells us everything. Everything that happens on the network. This is where we see it, whatever that network element is made up from. Working with SaaS applications to see what applications people are accessing, to take information, to take event information from that. Even to take the alerts from the security vendors themselves already deployed in the network. So we now have the security layer, the network layer, the infrastructure layer, all communicating with this, sending data which is being analyzed by all these 100 supervised and unsupervised models. And I haven't even talked about the SIM. We can take the SIM as well. We can take the event information from there as well. Why as well? Because SIMs are hard to manage. SIMs aren't really a security solution. If a SIM actually protected you, you would have explosive charges on your routers. And at the first sign of attack, you would adopt the Swiss model and blow the bridge. No. As well as, because Splunk, fantastic SIM as it is, licenses based on the amount of data stored and the number of feeds. So for budget purposes, and I did this myself in my former career, I restricted the number of feeds. As a security professional, I can tell you, it's the thing you don't see that's going to kick you in the ass. So we take all of that, we take the ability to actually run a packet processor to actually capture traffic natively as well, and then through the analytics, produce forensic level reports that you can act against. And of course, there's integration with ClearPass. It's not required, but it's available to provide an immediate quarantine, boot, or choke of an offending device, whether it's BYOD, IoT, or corporate. We've made some changes to ClearPass in the last year. We've improved the profiling capability. We added mmap back in. That's right, we took it away, but we brought it back at a lighter level, working with 16 other ways of identifying devices to give you visibility. We also made some improvements to the wired security. Not ours, you understand, but some other competitors, so that you have sequential authentication available in there, and I'll speak to that in a moment. Finally, we've continued to add other vendors into the exchange and extensions, our microservices component, including Affinity, the makers of Landesk and Carbon Black, and we'll be adding more in coming weeks and coming months. But on Connect, our sequential authentication system has perhaps had one of the biggest impacts to customers. 50% of IoT devices are wired. Wired. Now, whilst we're leading today, that wasn't always the case. There is a huge amount of Cisco that's already deployed there. But if you don't have commonality of iOS, then enabling 802.1x, yes, I'm sorry, I'm geeking out for a moment on authentication, but this is the gold standard of authentication. Authentication before connectivity, knowing who's knocking on the door before they knock. If you can't do that, then you have to compromise. So, OnConnect allows you to work with Cisco, and now with legacy HP to use sequential authentication. If the device, because the device has to support 802.1x as well, not all smart devices are smart enough to be secure. If the device doesn't support it and the network doesn't support it, then we can force the use of SNMP. And if that's not possible, then we'll use a captive portal, even if the device can't go to it. Because as captive portal says, it's truly captive and not capable of communicating with the rest of the enterprise infrastructure. That's how we get to that control panacea of all devices being authenticated, authorized, or not connected. No unknowns in your environment, wired, wireless, multi-vendor. That is an Aruba ClearPass unique selling point. Unlike our competitors, we don't do laid-back neck. We don't do connectivity and then security. It is a secure connectivity solution. So the final part of that software stack is location services. Think about it. Everything we do, especially here in the Aruba headquarters, is about that connected experience, this hyper-connected world that we live in. Being able to deliver the content relevant to the place you're in is becoming more essential. It's about how retailers are competing, it's about hospitality is competing, and even in our own building. When we moved in here in January, we had 97 meeting rooms. Now, if I asked any of my colleagues in here where Carmel is, they would probably tell me it's about 70 miles to the south of here. Actually, it's a 4-person meeting room on the 5th floor. But you're not going to know that natively. And when you're delivering a quality experience, location has a huge amount to offer in the campus environment. We get a lot of information on location from Wi-Fi natively, and ALE will tell you how the network's being used, but also where it's being used. What are your traffic patterns? As in, how are people walking around this space while connected? This gives you the opportunity to better use that space. An example we're going to be doing over the next couple of months, now that Hewlett-Packard Enterprise are moving into our delightful headquarters, we're going to work out how best to reutilize the space we've occupied for the last 10 months, and that will be part of it. That's a real use case. But Bluetooth has got additional capability, and it's worth reminding our partners that a lot of those access points you've been deploying these past couple of years actually include the BLE functionality. So we go from, where am I, augmenting those access points with a beacon and providing navigation services, to now, where is it? And that's done quite simply with an asset tracker. What is it? It in healthcare could be a infusion pump. In hospitality, it could be a luggage cart. In a warehouse environment, it could be a forklift. Literally a forklift. Where is it? How many have I got? How is it being utilized? All of that comes from location. All of that a natural extension to the wireless environment that you've already created. Our next video, this is the end of this video.
Yep. So tune into the next video. We'll run through sales plays, competitive, and how you can grow your business.